July 31st, 1944. The Balabac Strait, the narrow throat of water between Borneo and the Philippines, 300 feet below the surface, inside a steel cylinder named the USS Parcha, Commander Lawson Patterson Ramage sits with a problem that has already been solved by arithmetic. The solution says he is dead. 4 Japanese destroyers are pacing overhead, laying depth charges in careful patterns. The sea presses against his hull at more than 100 pounds per square inch. Battery power has fallen to 18%. Oxygen will last perhaps an hour and a half. Sonar reports 17 ships in the convoy above, tankers, freighters, and the 4 destroyers actively hunting him. By conventional doctrine, the correct move is to stay down, stay quiet, survive. By the math of survival, his chances are collapsing by the minute. Ramage chooses a different equation. He orders the boat to surface, in daylight, in the center of the convoy, and to attack at full speed. Submarines caught on the surface by destroyers historically survive about 4% of the time. He has 6 torpedoes remaining. The nearest American support is 200 miles away. The Parcha can submerge in roughly 60 seconds, but lining up a precise torpedo shot takes about 45. That leaves 15 seconds of decision space between life and destruction. 15 seconds separating each choice from the last one he may ever make. And yet, he intends to sink more ships on this patrol than many commanders manage in an entire war. He will close with enemy destroyers near enough to see sailors on their decks. He will do it because 3 days earlier he promised his crew they would not leave torpedoes unfired. He has already decided that he is not departing these waters with ammunition still in his tubes. Lawson Patterson Ramage was born on January 19, 1909, in Monroe Bridge, Massachusetts, the son of a Spanish-American War veteran. When he was 7 years old, he built a crude raft from borrowed lumber and floated 3 miles downriver before anyone realized he was gone. When confronted, he answered simply that he wanted to know what lay beyond the bend. That answer never really changed. To understand how a man can deliberately surface into what amounts to a firing squad and prevail, you have to understand that curiosity and defiance were constants in him. In 1927, he entered the Naval Academy at Annapolis, physically unremarkable and easily overlooked. During a summer cruise aboard the battleship USS Arkansas, a fire erupted in the engine room. Midshipmen were ordered out. Ramage moved toward the smoke, dragged 2 unconscious sailors to safety, then returned to help secure the compartment. Asked why he had not obeyed the evacuation order, he replied that the order seemed incomplete. He graduated near the middle of his class, but one line in his evaluation stood out: does not panic. In 1935 at Pearl Harbor, serving on a destroyer, he again revealed the same pattern. During a nighttime exercise, another ship lost power and drifted toward a reef. The captain ordered vessels to hold position. Approaching in darkness was deemed too dangerous. Ramage, officer of the deck, brought his ship within 50 yards and used a rifle-fire grappling device he had designed weeks earlier to pass a tow line. The drifting destroyer was pulled clear. He received a formal reprimand for disobedience and an informal recommendation for submarine duty. The note observed that he treated orders as suggestions and treated physical limits as problems to be solved. By 1942, he had completed submarine school in New London near the top of his class and served as executive officer aboard USS Grenadier. Early patrols were quiet, but in the South China Sea, he persuaded his captain to close from 3,000 yards to less than 800 to attack a zigzagging troop transport. The gamble worked. 3 torpedoes struck home, and a destroyer escort passed so close overhead during the escape that the crew could hear its propellers thrashing the water. The patrol report described Ramage as possessing aggression balanced by calculation. He was recommended for command. In 1943, he took over USS Trout, telling his crew in a speech barely 10 seconds long that they would get close and they would stay late. Under his leadership, the submarine's results mounted quickly. Soon he was given a new Gato-class boat, the USS Parcha, equipped with improved radar and manned by a hand-picked crew. His mission was simple in phrasing and enormous in implication: make Japanese shipping lanes dangerous. Official doctrine advised keeping distance and maximizing survival. In his cabin, Ramage kept a small card that said, in effect, close enough to see faces and leave only when the torpedoes are gone. On July 30th, 1944, intelligence reported a heavily protected convoy assembling near Borneo. 17 ships, including 4 destroyers and multiple tankers, loaded with aviation fuel bound for Philippines. Every available submarine was alerted. Parche reached the area first. At 2:47 in the afternoon, radar detected multiple contacts 20,000 yards away. Through binoculars, Ramage counted columns of merchant ships and the restless movements of destroyer escorts. If he attacked submerged at standard range, he might manage 2 shots before being force deep. 2 shots against 17 targets was a poor exchange. His executive officer suggested shadowing until nightfall, but by then the convoy would be under air cover. Ramage watched for half a minute and made his decision. They would surface in the middle of the formation and fire until nothing remained to fire. He explained the plan to the crew. Someone asked what would happen when the destroyers opened up. Ramage answered that they would dive, reload, surface somewhere else, and continue. How many times? As many as necessary. The crew voted. The decision was unanimous. By late afternoon, Parche maneuvered beneath the convoy and rose to periscope depth. A tanker lay ahead at 1,800 yards, a freighter to port, a destroyer off starboard. Ramage lowered the scope and ordered the submarine to break surface. At barely 1,600 yards from a massive tanker, Parche burst into daylight. Confusion flashed across the decks of the merchantman. Submarines did not normally appear at that range in broad daylight. Torpedoes streaked away. The first tanker erupted in towering fire as aviation fuel ignited. A freighter loaded with munitions detonated seconds later, its blast shattering windows on neighboring ships. Only then did the destroyers fully react, turning hard toward the unexpected attacker. Ramage attempted to strike one with his remaining torpedoes, but aggressive maneuvering caused him to miss. With the destroyer closing rapidly and guns aligning, he ordered an emergency dive. Depth charges thundered around the hull, shaking insulation from the overhead. Through it all, Ramage calmly plotted the scattering convoy and noticed 2 tankers fleeing toward shallower water. Once reloaded, he brought Parche back up and attacked again, this time firing past an intervening destroyer at the tanker beyond. The escort captain had to choose between chasing the submarine or evading torpedoes running under his keel. He chose to pursue, and the torpedoes struck the tanker behind him in a vast explosion. Another torpedo dispatched a second tanker before Parche slipped beneath renewed depth charging. When the explosion ceased, burning fuel painted the evening sky orange. Ships were sinking in multiple directions. Rather than withdraw, Ramage selected another group and went back in. As twilight deepened, Parche ran on the surface at high speed, chasing freighters at 18 knots. Torpedoes were fired in quick succession. Several found their marks. A destroyer charged and opened fire. Ramage stayed topside long enough to launch 2 more torpedoes, one which tore the escort apart amidships. Only then did he dive again to reload. After full darkness fell, radar contacts revealed another cluster of ships with a destroyer in their midst. Positioning at an angle, Ramage fired a carefully timed spread designed to pass through the formation. A searchlight suddenly locked onto Parche as the final torpedoes ran. At his order, the submarine slipped under the surface seconds before impact. Multiple hits followed, and the ocean erupted with counterattacks. Dozens of depth charges over an hour and a half. Ballast tanks were damaged. Heat inside the boat climbed past 100 degrees. The crew endured and waited. Near midnight, the depth charges tapered off. After a cautious interval, Ramage surfaced once more. A lone destroyer still circled in the distance. He reloaded, closed the range under cover of darkness, and fired a final trio of torpedoes. All 3 struck. The explosion illuminated the sea like lightning, and the last escort vanished beneath the waves. The battle had lasted more than 8 hours. Parche had fired 24 torpedoes and sunk 17 ships. 5 tankers, 10 freighters, and 2 destroyers, amounting to roughly 78,000 tons in a single patrol. When headquarters received the patrol report, it asked for confirmation, assuming a transcription error. 17 ships seemed improbable. Ramage confirmed the number and suggested they check Japanese communications. Intercepts soon indicated emergency rerouting orders and confusion. The Japanese believed multiple submarines had attacked. Only one had been present. Upon Parche's return to Pearl Harbor in August, Admiral Charles Lockwood waited at the dock. He admitted he had doubted the report's accuracy. Ramage replied that the Japanese likely had as well. In September 1944, Admiral Chester Nimitz presented him the Medal of Honor for the action. Asked later what he had been thinking when he surfaced into the convoy, Ramage answered that he was thinking about the torpedoes he still had left. He continued to patrol aggressively that autumn, repeating similar tactics against heavily escorted convoys and proving the earlier battle had not been luck but method. After the war, he rose to flag rank, rarely speaking about decorations and always crediting his crew. At the Naval War College years later, a student asked whether he would make the same decision again. Ramage paused, then said yes, the mathematics remained the same. If the objective was to sink ships, then one had to fire torpedoes, and firing torpedoes required accepting risk. He retired in 1969 after more than 4 decades of service and returned to hometown by the same river, where he had once tested a raft against the current. He died on April 17, 1990, and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. The USS Parche went on to complete additional patrols and earn multiple citations. Her reputation forged in part by that night in the Balabac Strait. Ramage's Medal of Honor rests in the Naval Academy Museum, accompanied by a simple maxim in his handwriting: get close, stay late, leave when the torpedoes are gone. There are 2 ways to frame what happened. One version describes a solitary submarine commander surfacing amid 17 enemy ships and destroying them in a single relentless engagement. The other describes a calculated series of surface attacks executed over 8 hours, exploiting gaps in escort patterns and accepting extreme danger in exchange for offensive opportunity. Both accounts are accurate. What matters is not recklessness, but priority. Remaining submerged might have guaranteed survival, and perhaps 2 successful shots. Surfacing offered a possibility of 17, and the probability of death. Ramage chose the option aligned with his mission rather than his safety. Most commanders calculated odds of living. He calculated tonnage per torpedo. When the question changes from will I survive to did I use everything I brought to accomplish the task, the answer changes as well. Once the priority is fixed, the fear becomes secondary and the decision, however dangerous, becomes almost inevitable.